Thank you, William. I'd like to thank all of you all again for the opportunity to speak here, for your time and listening to me. And I'd like to recognize and thank William for bringing this together. Thank you, We've spoken earlier along the way about the Constitution and what it means and how it affects our rights, and how it affects our right to keep and bear arms, how it affects us as citizens and our relationship to God, building worship. And I want to talk a little bit because I find in my conversations with people that, and this is especially true of folks that are just a little bit engaged in politics, they don't seem to understand our system. They don't understand how it's put together. And so when we talk to them about issues, they are very confused. It's almost like we're speaking a different language. And so I want to talk a little bit about the foundations of our system. And it's been alluded to before, that the foundations of our system, the ideas and the concepts, you'll find them throughout the Bible. And in fact, if you look to what Jefferson was writing about when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, you will find that his own writings were derived from those of John Locke. And if you've never read John Locke's second treatise on government, it's almost like an elaboration of everything that's in the Declaration of Independence in great detail, and where the source of the logic undermining or that underpins all of the elements in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. Now, just to go through those and to summarize, and if you know the preamble, please repeat it with me. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. It's common for us to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, for example, when we come together. I've always been an advocate that we should start a tradition of reciting the Declaration of Independence, because, the reason is, the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, it ties us together, but it doesn't say anything about what we believe. It's not a creed, it's just, okay, I believe in the flag, I support the flag. The Declaration of Independence has within that very few words, it has the fundamental philosophy that created the United States of America. If you don't understand what's in the Declaration, you can't really understand our system of government. I'm going to break it down a little bit. Because the reason why the Declaration was so revolutionary is because it put the entire system of government on its head. In Europe at that time, the understanding was that you had a king, and the king had what they called the divine right to rule, and he got that power. He got all the power he had directly from God. That was what was believed. And if you read Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, you'll understand what I'm talking about. He wrote an entire book on how the king ruled with the power of God. God gave him power, and then he conferred power downwards, and whatever power was left was whatever he decided would be left to the subjects is what the subjects had left in terms of what liberties they had. The Declaration turns that completely on its head. It says, no, power doesn't go from God to the king, to the lords, to the magistrates, to the subjects. No, that's not how it works. God gives the rights and the power directly to the citizens. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Well, now wait. What do you mean all men are created equal? What about the king? He's not equal, right? No, there is no king. We're all equal. There's no king. Get rid of that. We're all equal. We all have rights. The purpose of government is to secure the rights of the people. That's the fundamental purpose of government. And if you understand that, you understand how much of a revolutionary idea that was in 1776, and how that's still the philosophy that underpins our American system, which is completely different from what's in Europe. Even after all these years, Europe still has the idea that the government has all the power, and it confers whatever it feels like down on the subjects. That the government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. Think about that. The government derives power from the consent of those who put it into place, who created it. It's a complete inversion of the system that they had in Europe, the European view of the world, of government power. And if you understand that, then you understand why some of these conversations that we have with people where they say, well, the government should just do this, or Congress should just do this without the other thing. They're starting from a completely wrong premise. You have to begin by thinking of the rights of the people, because that is the fundamental issue. You have to also understand that, setting aside the Declaration, our federal system, and I touched on this earlier, our federal system, we don't have just one big national government, as we know. The states are not just vassal, subject governments of the national government. That's not how this works. Now, see, the states created the federal government. The states put the federal government together. The government we have was not there, and then it created the states. Now, after the 13 colonies, they did. But originally, the states created the federal government. And we had our original Constitution, which was the Articles of Confederation. It didn't work out so well, so they centralized more of the power. But we never got away from the idea that the states were taking powers that they got from the citizens and were then conferring limited power on the federal government. We have to understand that. We have to understand the idea that we have enumerated powers. That's what the federal government is supposed to do. Congress is empowered in Article 1, Section 8 to do certain things. So that's the list of the powers that they have. Why are those the powers? Because those are the powers that people gave them. So when the federal government, when the Congress tries to do something, or when the president tries to do something, it's not in those enumerated powers. It's operating outside of its legitimate authority. There's another set of provisions, of course. This is the Bill of Rights. Those carve out from whatever powers that the federal government has. And what we're talking about today is the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment has been described as the palladium of our liberties. And like some of y'all that know something about metallurgy might hear palladium and think the element palladium. That's not what they're talking about. The palladium, in ancient societies, a palladium was a thing that was believed to protect a city from harm. A lot of times it would be a statue or some idol. It was what was designed, and they always knew that if anything happened to the palladium, if someone stole it or it was destroyed, then the city was vulnerable. The Second Amendment is indeed the palladium of our liberties, because once you have no power to assert your rights are just things on paper and they can be taken away. The Second Amendment are the teeth. The Second Amendment provides the teeth to the rest of our liberties. And we must never allow the teeth to be pulled out of our Bill of Rights. But going back to what I said earlier, we need to educate our fellow citizens on these core ideas. We need to make sure that everybody understands the Declaration of Independence and what it means and how we've never departed from that. That was the foundation for our government. That was the foundation for everything that has come since. And we never have rejected that. There's never been a declaration of Congress that the Declaration of Independence was null and void or anything like that. We still adhere to those ideas, and we still teach those ideas. But we don't teach them enough to our children. We don't teach them enough to our fellow citizens. And because of that, far too many of our citizens and our younger people don't understand the system that we have and why it is the way it is. That's our job, all of our jobs, every one of us. If your children don't understand the Declaration, if they don't know what it says, teach them what it says. If they don't understand it, sit down with them and talk to them. I'm an advocate of people taking trying to find an hour a week to sit down with your kids and talk to them about what we have and how we're on the verge of losing what we have. And if we do, it's not going to be pretty. We need to educate our elected officials. We talk about vetting elected officials. A lot of times we're actually needing to teach them. And somebody that's willing to learn, teach them. But they need to understand that our system, one of the first questions I ever ask to a person when I'm vetting them is, what's the fundamental purpose of government? The answer to that is to protect the liberties of the people. Anybody that tells me, well, we need to build more highways or, to you know, have a big city hall, or that's not the purpose of government. Those are ancillary things that government does. The purpose of government is to protect the rights of the people. And anybody that doesn't understand that doesn't need to be holding public office. But we need to educate them. Just like in Rockwall the other night, when the city attorney was telling them that, oh no, if the federal government tells us to do this or that or the other thing, we got to do it. Not normally, no. Ordinarily, you don't have to do it. And for the city attorney to be telling the elected officials, no, that's the way the system works. No, exactly. You get rid of him. So that's really all I've got to set up. But we reinstill in everyone an understanding of our federal system and how power flows from the people upwards, not from the top down, from the people upwards. And that the fundamental purpose of giving even limited power to the government is so that those government elected servants, and there are servants, remember that. I don't like it when we talk about our leaders in Washington. I don't see any leaders in Washington except maybe Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. But other than that, so that's kind of my setup. My challenge to you is to take that to your communities. Talk to everybody you can. And if they don't understand it, be patient with them. That's the other thing I want to say. Be patient with people. There was a time you probably didn't understand some of these things. And some people around you may not understand, but if they're willing to struggle with it, walk that path with them. Take the time. You know, don't get all your dander up because they disagree with you. Walk them through it. With that, I'd like to open it up. We've got some folks here to talk about their own stuff. Pastor Roden, following up on what we said earlier, what do you want to get across to everyone here about the Constitution and what we should be doing with our fellow citizens?
I think you covered it well. The Constitution is the means by which we are able to maintain and secure our liberties. Those limitations that are specified within the Constitution, it defines how the government should function, and what its function is should be that which we hold them to account. There are 17, I think, limitations, count, in the Constitution, in Article 1. Section, I think the listing is in Section 8, and they list out 17 limitations. We need to hold them to that. Right now, our government is operating outside the context in which the states limited them. An example of that is what Justice Roberts did. What Justice Roberts did was that he went beyond the enumerated duties specified to the judiciary in the Constitution. He went clearly beyond it and declared Obamacare to be a tax. It was a declaration from him, not from the Senate or from the House. It wasn't. He made that declaration. And the declaration was critically flawed. Before he made the declaration that it was a tax based upon the rendering or the writings or the Senate. Well, those of us who know anything about the Constitution recognize that the taxing power is not in the Senate. It's in the House. So we got two flaws already right out of his mouth, and we heard nothing from our so-called servants who have swore to uphold and to protect our Constitution from foreign and domestic enemies. Said nothing. Not a word. But that's okay they didn't say anything, because they speak when we tell them to speak. And so the problem was we said nothing. Come on, somebody. Am I right about it? We said nothing. We were upset, we were angry, we were frustrated, but we didn't know we had this as the means of corralling them and bringing them in and limiting them and holding them to an account. The Constitutional Defenders of Texas is an organization I started that is started with a view of exacting a constitutional principle that was given to us by the Founding Fathers, found in the First Amendment in the Constitution. There are 5 platforms in there. Most of us are familiar with them. The right to religious freedom, the right to restrict the government from interfering with our liberty, our religious liberty, the right to free speech, and the right to free press. The fifth one is the one that we have not exercised. Anybody know what that is, other than constitutional defendant? Let me tell you what it is. The right to peaceably assemble and to petition redress for grievances. The word redress there means a remedy for a wrong perpetrated against we the people, to set right and to amend. That is. We have the means to check this government, but many of us are unfamiliar with the context in which the founding fathers have provided for us this incredible instrument that must be used. I think it was Thomas Wood says the Constitution, after all, is just a piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything until we exercise the principles therein. But if we abdicate and capitulate to the interpretation of the Constitution to the federal government, they will continue to grow and to develop and rip us off of our liberties. We cannot assume that they have a monopoly on interpreting the Constitution. Somebody say amen. Amen. That means you and I are part of that process. Amen. And we must determine whether they are within the confines of this incredible, God-oriented document. But even as God is being ignored today, we're ignoring this. Amen.
Can I just say one thing on that, Pastor? And all I want to say to that is our silence gives consent. That's right. Yeah. It's not enough for us to come to these meetings and acknowledge and say amen behind revelation and information that's apparently right before us. When we choose to say nothing, we give consent to it.
Amen to that.
May I say one thing too?
Certainly.
You know, in the Bible, in the first chapter of Joshua, Moses died, and God was giving Joshua instructions as to how to proceed after the death of Moses. And the verses that come next are very instrumental to us, because what he said, what God told Joshua was that you should follow Moses. And what Moses represents is the successful formula or the successful way this job is done. So he's telling Joshua, observe and to do all that my servant Moses commanded you. Don't turn from it from the right hand to the left, or to the left. And then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. We need to know this Constitution, and we need to make sure we follow it in all, not just part. If we allow all these people to take away our Second Amendment rights, it's just like a woman who's expert at making a German chocolate cake. Go to the fair, get the blue ribbon, and she gives me the formula. I can't boil water without burning it. But she gives me the formula to the German chocolate cake. I should be able to cook that cake as well as she does. But she gives me this formula, then I started following the formula in all. I said, well, she said, well, 1 stick of butter. I said, well, I like 4 sticks of butter in my cake. You know, what I'm going to come out with is going to be something completely different from what she had. Yeah, it's not going to be the same thing. And we let people change and adjust our Constitution, take away this thing, add that thing. It's not going to be the same thing. Right? What was a blue ribbon German chocolate cake going to be a mess.
So am I if I have 4 sticks of butter.
Amen to that. Now, one of the things that I could not agree more, because that's the very first thing I would encourage, if you don't know your Constitution and you don't know your Declaration, my strongest, I could not encourage you too strongly. Take that thing apart. And it's not exactly light reading. I'm not going to tell you it is. But are we, does it matter to us? I mean, is it important enough? I think it is. And right now, I'll tell you, when you see, if you need some inspiration, I will guarantee you that when Ted Cruz was sitting in law school and poring over some law books, that probably wasn't a lot of fun. But you know what? Everything that he learned back in those days, and all that he's learned since, allowed him to go down to the well of the Senate and ask the questions and make the statements that have the power, that have the pillars of power shaking right now. They are in the back rooms trying to figure out what to do about these guys because they know what questions to ask. There is nothing scarier to our elected officials than somebody that's figured out their game. But we've got to know the right questions. We've got to understand the foundations of our own system. And that means once you've got the Declaration down, and I'm telling you, this will be some heavy reading, but go look up the second treatise, Locke's second treatise of government, because that is the elaboration of what you will find in the Declaration of Independence. And then the Founding Fathers were very familiar with all that stuff. They built our system using all those materials as the basis. Go read Aristotle. There is nothing you can do in the short term if you do not know these things, and to know your Constitution and know how it came to be. Because you can then follow in the footsteps of folks like David Simpson and Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and ask the right questions. Because think about that. What did Rand Paul do that was so controversial? He asked a question. He just asked a question. He said, Ted Cruz asked the question first. He says, now, Mr. Attorney General, would it be constitutional for you to kill an American citizen on American soil without a trial? Well, I don't, that maybe wouldn't be, I don't know that we would do that. Okay, well, thank you for that answer, but what I asked you was a very specific question. Would it be constitutional for you, or for the president, to kill an American citizen on American soil without a trial? And I'll tell you, if you watch that video, he never got a straight answer from Mulder. He finally took a half answer and decided that, but he never got a straight answer. And even if you read Holder's letter after the filibuster, it still doesn't fully answer the question.
Hey, can I ask you this? The Constitution was a result. The Constitution came by consequence of people dying.
Yes.
The fields are covered in red.
Yes.
The Constitution will be defended by no less sacrifice.
Maybe.
And the Constitution, we believe that the very axiom of the Constitution is founded upon biblical principles, even so much so. The question that we have to be forced to answer is, are we at par with the Constitution? The Constitution is the standard. We need to come into it.
That's correct.
And we can continue to talk about it and learn it and talk about it and learn it. But my God, when are we going to enforce it at the same cost it took to create it?
I think we need to teach it, because we're not going to defend something we don't know anything about.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
But
many of us in here don't.
It's the dumbing down.
This is, we're not talking to people who don't know. You know. The question is, what are you willing to do? I asked a question back in June at the Republican convention. I was outside at a rally for God and country kind of thing. And I asked the question there, are you willing to take your message to the street? It's time for us to take it to the street. And how we take it to the street, that means we can rattle the system a little bit if we take it to the street. Right now, they don't believe that the Tea Party got teeth. They don't. The Republican Party doesn't believe you've got teeth, right? And so my proposal was that we take our placards and we go during rush hour and we walk across the street one step at a time. Slow traffic down rush hour to a stop. The media will have to look over there and say, who's doing that? And what are they saying? We believe our government is operating in unconstitutional waters. And we demand redress. And just walk across that street, turn around and come back the other way, as slow as we went across. John Wiley Price did it here in Dallas. And he got national attention.
We won't break any windshield wipers.
Right? You hear what I'm saying? I'm saying they need to do something. I'm tired of when I talk across this state to the same people who are sitting there amen me, but when I leave a meeting, they go home and do nothing. Yeah. It's time for us to act if we believe in this Constitution. I'm ready to act.
Amen. Pastor Broden. Right now,
Hold on just a second. We got a question from Kurt.
No, I was just going to read, if Samuel Adams said this, if ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government. Is that happening? Is that happening? Our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin. How do you become an experienced patriot? Where are the experienced patriots?
on the front line, at the tip of the spear.
For me to live is Christ and to die is gain.
Amen.
It's short. Right now, we're all just hornets buzzing around the nest. We got to each go out and sting somebody, draw that line in the sand, do the filibuster, stand in front of TV stations and tell them they're just lying to us.
Well, let me, and I don't directly disagree with what's been said. However, I will say this. Do we know, I will only challenge one thing that Pastor Broden said. Do we know our Constitution? If I was to ask anybody to come up here and explain to me what happened in the case of Wickard v. Philbin, how many of y'all would be able to do that? Okay? Now, you may not think that's important. So why is that not? Because if you don't understand something about Wickard v. Philbin, you don't know how our Constitution, how our government got out of its box. Okay? Understanding how our government got out of its box is important. Understanding the scope and the limits of our constitutional system, it's important. Now, we do need to act, but we can't just act. We also, while we're acting, we have to be educating ourselves. And we have to be educating, because we can't educate our neighbors if we're not ourselves educated. So we need to do both. We need to educate ourselves, but we also need to be active. Yes, ma'am.
I have heard that once, after 90 days, the presidential proclamations, I'm using the wrong word.
Executive orders.
Executive orders, yeah. Executive orders become law if nobody complains.
Let me address that. There's a lot of misinformation about executive orders. There is so much, and unfortunately, the fact that people don't understand, and this goes back to what I'm talking about. If you don't know the scope of what might be a legitimate executive order, because there is such a thing, okay? The fact that someone does an executive order doesn't mean that all of a sudden they set themselves as the emperor or something. There are legitimate executive orders, but it's knowing the difference between what is a legitimate executive order and what's not a legitimate executive order. There's a lot of misinformation out there about treaties. I've been told, I don't know how many emails I've gotten that says, oh my God, if Hillary Clinton signs such and such treaty, then the cops are showing up tomorrow and they're going to take your guns. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. Getting a treaty to have the force of law requires Senate, and not just a filibuster to approve the Senate, but you've got to get 2/3 of the Senate. You know how hard that is to get 2/3 of the Senate? So, not that we shouldn't be on the lookout, but sometimes we're going around chasing hysterical things because we don't know, we don't understand. We have to learn more, and we have to know the difference between an email that we should forward along and one that we maybe ought to just keep off to the side. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about, is understanding. You don't have to know every last detail, but understanding the basics. And I'll be honest with all of it, and even this is true of me. We don't understand it as well as we should, and if we would understand it better, we would be more effective patriots. Yes?
The Heritage Foundation, Hillsdale College actually put out the Constitution 101, and now they've got the 201. And it's free, and you can watch it online, and I started watching it, and I realized that, it's professors standing there talking about it, and they use, $10 words, and we're living in a, $2 world society. And so then I started looking at, because you really want to win back the hearts and minds of these young folks. And I got a chance to interview some young folks for another project that I was involved in. They really are being taught that the Constitution is a living document that can be changed and modified almost at will. That the Bible is needs to be revised, updated. And these are from some questions that we ask kids today, that they are being allowed and taught in school that these things, that the Bible is a myth, or it's shocking really what they're teaching these kids.
And you're right, Sylvia.
We need to bring it to a level where conversation and recognize that we're not talking to folks, that the people we're trying to win over may not understand some of these.
Right, that is exactly right. And that is, and we need to, again, going back full circle, we need to understand it. We need to make sure we know it well so that we can teach others. And we know a little bit, and we're learning more every day. We need to know it well because we can't teach what we don't understand. But you're absolutely right. The young people are being taught a whole bunch of gobbledygook, and most of it is just that, and that's a kind word for it. They're not being taught the history. They're not being taught the fundamentals. They're not being taught the philosophy. And because of that, when we talk to them about the big issues of the day, they're using a whole other terminology. And of course, the left controls the language, and we let them. You know, and I find myself falling into that trap. I will use sometimes the language of the left, fall into their trap. Once you know, if you read the books by Sun Tzu, The Art of War, whoever chooses the battlefield has the great advantage in the battle. Well, guess what? The left has picked the battlefield and language, and they set the parameters, and then we're supposed to fight. Well, we've already, by accepting their language, we've already put ourselves at a disadvantage. Before I'm going to have to wrap this up because I have an appointment I have to get to. But before I do, I really do want to thank everybody, our panelists, and in particular, I would like to thank Kennard. Because Kennard, I know you came a long way, and I know, you made me feel like Daniel on the Lions Den. But I want to thank you because this is exactly what we need to be doing. We need to be having a conversation.
It's been a learning experience being here, you know what I'm saying, to hear the other side. A lot of times we don't take the time to hear the other side. It's been very informative. It makes me want to go and study more about, I'm saying, the other side, the Tea Party, also the Republican Party, and y'all raising great points about the future of this country. Well, with respect to Barack, I think we need to understand that Barack, he tried to be bipartisan, and he tried to pass this stuff through the Congress. When they don't want to, see, when you don't want to, you the head of the country, he's our president, and people don't want to work with him, he had to make, by the Constitution, he has the right to make an executive order. Now, if anybody took the time to read the 23 executive orders that he passed, none of those orders would take the guns from people who already have guns. If you take the time to read each one was just simple stuff like background check. For my neighborhood, it's important that there's a lot of what they call thugs in inner city neighborhoods, so you want to make sure that those people don't get guns. Now, I understand we have a lot of law-abiding citizens who do have the right to have guns, but I think his point was to try to keep the guns out of the hands of the people who don't make those wise decisions. So you don't have to, that's why we have the police. You don't need a gun to protect your house because we have the police. When you get to a point where America, every individual needs guns to protect themselves, that shows that it's too much crime. The wrong people have the gun. I think there's a lot of crime in the schools, Columbine and the other schools, but you have to understand it's been crime in the inner cities for a long, long time. And most people who get the murder cases are the people in the inner cities. I think Barack had to pass some kind of gun control to prevent those people from getting those guns.
Well, Kennard, I just want to thank you for bringing your perspective. I have my own opinion, but I do want to thank you for bringing it, and that's important for us to be discussing these things. I need to wrap up my portion of this program. We're ready to move on. I want to thank everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. We had to step out, but we really appreciate you being here. He's going to be one of the traveling panelists with us when we launch this tour on the 21st. There's no time to lose. I need everybody now to take your place. It's time for you to ask questions. It's time for you to make comments. We're going to form a line right here. So get in line, ask your question, make a comment. The appropriate panelists will address it. And these are the guidelines. We're going to have the appropriate panelists to address it. Then we'll have a follow-up from either a person or a panelist. After that, we have to move to the next statement, next question. Okay? Now, I'd like to introduce to you all the moderator who's going to moderate this section. This is going to be a lightning fast. It's going to be fun. We got 2 cameras going. One camera on the person asks the question. Another camera is going to be on the panelists. So with that, please take your positions, and we're going to get the ball rolling. Would you please welcome